What do we have here? Ooh, that is some dirty bar tape. Oh, some pretty good scratches. This is a Trek 2200. Oh, that is severely dirty. Oh, well, is this a diamond in the rough or is it not? After this. Ew. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles.
Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin the Guy. Obviously, I have a garage shop. Taking scary how to use bikes one bike at a time.
If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles. Hey, I'm Justin the Guy. We are looking at this old bike and we're going to determine, is it a diamond in the rough or is it not? Yeah, I pick up several bikes, I refurbish them. Sometimes I get into these little kind of project bikes that are really kind of dirty and need a lot of little help. Has it just been sitting in the garage or a shed or hopefully not outside for a long period of time? Or will it be something I can clean up and become really a good bike for somebody getting into road riding and bring new life to it? Kind of like in a way of recycling-ish, making sure it's not just abused anymore. But we're also going to go over the costs of what may need to be replaced on this as well, in addition to if we come across anything major. So when I look at bikes specifically like this, there's three things that I definitely want to look at. One, first is the frame and fork, to inspect it, to make sure there's no cracks or damage that makes it inoperable or basically needs to go to the recycler. Reason being is the frame and fork, if it has actually been compromised, you pretty much have a box of parts. So to get to that, I need to strip it down, and while I do that, I'm going to inspecting the other parts. The other two things of the bike that want to be inspected closely is the wheels. That's a pretty heavy expense if they are damaged or need to be replaced. In addition to, lastly, but not as expensive, is the componentry. Well, I take that back. Some of the parts are more expensive to replace, but most likely if it's just like one bad brake or brake pads or the chain, that's a smaller financial lift to get this bike back in good working order per se. But you know, that's where you want to kind of really double check what's going to cost you the most first, in a sense. But you know, I've had several of these, and doing refurbishing bikes and being in industry for over 30 years and working on bikes, and actually I knew when I was working in a shop as service manager when they were new. I kind of know the ticks and nuances of things that need to look for that were issues back then that still translates to today. But you know, what I do on a lot of my bikes, it's already given, is bar tape, cables and a housing, and pedals, possibly a saddle. And that's something that you would look into too if you're buying something used, to get it just to be more refreshed, working at its best out of the gate possible for shifting and braking, and possibly new tires as well. So this might be something that has some good hidden talents to it or special parts. But anywho, let's just dive into this. What I start off with is basically stripping the wheels off. And by doing that, you release the quick releases on these and inspect the hubs. That feels pretty smooth, not loose. And when I go through these, I always check like the eyelets here, and I will need to wash this first. I have a tank, and once I have on the truing stand and really polish the rim, then I can really determine if this has been damaged. But for a first glance here, and it actually has a ridge on it where the tire was new, so it may be just low on air and needs to be cleaned up really good. So that's actually not too terrible. Check the shifting here. On these older shifting, the grease from the manufacturer sometimes cakes up and causes it to prevent it to shift because of the pulls. I will put these in the ultrasonic cleaner regardless. Yeah, this case is really kind of stiff. That way it'll clean up the internals on these and actually have them perform a lot better with a lighter lube once they're cleaned out. Knock down the derailleur to a small cog so it gets that derailleur out of the way while you pull the rear wheel off. That's just a good common practice. Fill in the rear hub. That seems to be pretty smooth too. As you can see, the cassette, it may just be dirty in the most part, that kind of thing. And on these particular paired spoke wheels from Bontrager, they did have a bad batch of them on the drive side where they would crack because they were over tensioned at the manufacturer. And see if there's anything that's compromised. Well, I'll give it a good cleaning, but that's going to be something that yet to be determined after that cleaning, and also the cassette. Also, I want to check that chain while we're here. Going to be taking that off. A chain checker is really nice to have in your own little toolbox. You can get the inexpensive ones. They do the same thing. They actually probably made in the same place. What we're looking for is a 0.5 or higher, and they say 0.75 is when it should be replaced, but I like to replace them if it's 0.5 personally, because I want to give a longer life to the chain for somebody that's just getting into road riding, so they're not like riding it for a half a season and they take it to the local shop and like, oh, your chain stretched already, so I don't want to give them the heartburn. So this one's actually in pretty decent form. I'll check it again after it's clean because it has a lot of gunk on it. And hopefully this one has a what they call power link, where, yep, you don't have to push that pin through on the Shimano ones. And the newer Shimano ones, they did adapt to the, they call a quick link. So there's that. But this guy, woo, got whipped up in there. Yeah, this frame is like uber dirty, or the drivetrain is uber dirty. Hopefully I can get that cleaned up. I mean, goodness gracious, look at that. I mean, that's like I mean, if that cleans up really good, we're doing good. But man, if it's hard to get some of those grease, sometimes it is hard to get off the grease that they put on there, or wherever put on there last, depending. And the heating element of this ultrasonic cleaner really helps out those melting or cutting that gunk right off. So I'm just cutting all my cables here, knowing I'm going to be replacing all of them, and refreshing, as well as most of the housing, if not all the housing. And determining, trying to figure out if this has been sitting outside for a long period of time. So I'm looking for indications of that, like little rust deposits in the bolts, that kind of thing. And that kind of gives me the little bit of an insight of what might be a mystery here. Also, we're going to dive into these braze-on mounts, or bolts for the bottles. And these are push pinned in, and if they are compromised, you have to cut them out and drill them out and rivet a new one in there, which is a lengthy process to do it right without damaging or scratching up the frame. Also, you got to pull the whole bottom bracket out to get all those little extra chunks that cut out and drop into the frame. Kind of a mess. So I really like to double check these, and also lube the bolts on them when I put them back on, so they don't have, they're less likely to be compromised to the next owner. Kind of forward thinking when working. And you know, good mechanics always kind of do that. They add either a little extra housing or adjustment range on the barrel adjusters. Just a couple little things you can do as a mechanic to give the person that's using that bike the best opportunity to do those adjustments and not run out of those ranges. What I'm talking about is like barrel adjusters. You want them more in, those kinds of things. Cables a little bit longer up front, so if you do switch out that stem, you're not having to replace all the cables and housing again. So just kind of like little things like that. I mean, obviously not too long to the point where it's not right, but you can add a little bit more length to these guys here, and still be able to accommodate if they want to put a taller stem and so forth on there. So the front derailleur, it just has like that old barn fuzz, I like to call it. You know, that kind of weird. And I grew up on a farm for a little while, and yeah, those sheds would always have some weird kind of gritty, greasy thing, dirt. I don't know. It's like they used to use some kind of bizarre creosote on everything to prevent from getting rusty or whatever. But that's what it kind of feels like, and it has a pretty good coated dust. So we've been one of those shed garages that have been sitting for a long time to accumulate that much grit for sure. Well, this is 105 brakes, so those are pretty decent. Good material still left on the pads, so that would kind of tell me that the bike wasn't really used per se, just bought and sat. Ooh, I got some weird squeaky noise unscrewing this out. That's how dry that is in there. Whew, we'll put some grease in there, make that a little more appealing. So yeah, just a huge layer of fuzz, dust on here. But the pads seem like there's a lot of material on there still. You can kind of see the cable itself has a little bit of a discoloring rusting on the outside of it. So that means it's probably been exposed to a little bit of the elements. Hopefully not too much in this case. And I like to take these barrel adjusters off the frame. It makes it easier to first clean the frame and have access and inspect it. And secondly, I like to have these cleaned out and lubed. So these are barrel adjusters that you can use while you're riding or on a ride and do adjustments. Suggested to do it when you're not actually going, but while you're on your ride, it's something you can do a couple turns and tweaks, and that's why I want to make that sure that's accessible for the new owner, that kind of thing. Whew, I don't want to get my body too close to this thing. Oh, this is gonna, whatever. I'm gonna have to take a shower after this one anyway. This Ultegra crankset, they have self-extracting plate bolts on them, and this is a double chain ring. So looking at the chain that it didn't seem to be stretched, and you still see the tabletops of the chain rings here, and these have a good valleys and good roundness to the tips, versus when the chain ring wears out, it comes with what they call shark teeth, and that becomes a pretty big issue because this won't allow the chain to stay on there very well, but this will actually secure that chain. So actually it just looks dirty. It looks like it's been worn, but once you clean this, that wearness kind of disappears, and that really shows the true usage of the componentry. Let's get underneath here. Get the non-drive crank arm off. And what's this gonna tell us? It just looks like it's dirty. Nothing really compromised. Threads are good. So nothing scary there so far. Just a whole bunch of dirt. Dirty dirt. So onto the derailleur. Derailleur hanger looks like it's still intact. In pretty good shape. The derailleur itself, well, let's take a look at this. All right, so this has some extra gunk on it. I'm moving my trash can underneath me because this has some built up kind of grease that I like to kind of peel off to help the ultrasonic cleaner get that off of there. And that's just kind of oddly satisfying to kind of cut off that layer. Basically what it is Teflon lubricant buildup, because it coats, but it also builds up that kind of material. And you just scrape that off. That helps it clean those jockey pulleys. Also, I'm inspecting those jockey pulleys, make sure The teeth of the pulley are still tabletops to them, and they're not worn down. Also, these were known for the bottom one, the lower pulley, to crack, but this one is not cracked, so we're good there. Kind of inspect the inside of it, make sure everything's good, straight, that kind of deal. So this looks like it's in good shape, just needs to be cleaned. Voila. All right, onto the frame inspection. This is where you get the dirtiest rag you have, because it's just going to get dirtier. And I use a Purple Power solution you can get at Walmart or on Amazon. 50/50 is my dilution. I also wear gloves so it doesn't eat at your skin. But this way I can get the surface of the frame clean before I start any kind of polishing. So you want to get all this off, especially if you're using pads, which I do. So I don't want to basically rub that dirt right into the paint. So I'm going to have to give this one a really good cleaning. Good rinse. Starting with the seat stay into the chain stay, drop out. Everything's looking good so far. All right. So this is where I found some scary bits on other frames where I remove that dirt and all of a sudden I'm seeing a cracked frame, damaged carbon. This doesn't have carbon on it, it's just aluminum. And this stuff is so thick dirt, it's like it really needs to soak a split second before I can really get that off. Ugh. Yeah, look at that. Oh, this still has the frame sticker. Bettyburg, Cycle and Fitness, Sales and Service. Area code 717, wherever that is. Might have to look that up. That's where this bike was sold initially. Also, looking at the frame, make sure there's no dings in the aluminum. The reflection of the light. We got some good dirty parts. Down tube inspection, seat tube inspection. So far. I'm going to check these welds too really good. Make sure there's nothing that's hairline cracks or anything. Not that I've seen very many of these of the Trex. This is the SL Alpha Aluminum Super, what was it, Super Light Aluminum. They've had a really good run on these back in the day. These were being built in the United States, so I'm not expecting to see any major damage. Some scratches from the garage on the fork blade that I mentioned before. And the other side doesn't really appear to be hardly any scratches. That's a pretty blue once you get that first layer of gunk off. Wow. They use a little bit higher grade of a weld too. They're a little more flat. The bead is not as pronounced. That was something that Trek learned to do, or manufacturing wise learned to do after he acquired Gary Klein, which was an engineer that had Klein bikes, and they did really high-end aluminum, and that's when Trek started producing welded aluminum frames versus bonded aluminum frames in the 90s. So, and this carried on into the 2000s, obviously, before they pushed a whole production overseas. So this one was built in the United States. And that seat stay looks good. Chain stay looks good. Seat tube on this side looks good. And again, when I do my polishing, I'm going over the frame like 4 or 5 more times. So I really inspect the frame like almost 7 or 8 times going over it, from all the different stages of polishing and cleaning. And all right, we are looking pretty good. Now for the hidden mystery of the underneath, because this is where you can find some damage that you didn't know. Double check the serial number, make sure it's there. This has that road tar type stuff that kicks up, which will need some additional cleaning. So the down tube looks good. checking, this is where like bike racks will sit and tear up the top, and also if the bike falls over in the garage, sometimes they'll get dinged there. They use a little bit heavier tubing on this particular bike so it didn't ding too easily. Bottom of the seat stays look pretty decent. A little tar goober, but nothing too concerning. All right, let's remove this plate and see if there's nothing really hidden underneath here. I like to get these off and clean the plate, because that's where your cables are riding on, right? So you want to make sure you have not a lot of dirt caked up underneath there. And we're going to kind of give this a little bit of a purple power bath. So get some of that stuff off. And for the real stubborn areas, you can use white lightning, which is used a lot in the cycling communities. Also, you can either use brake cleaner or carb cleaner, but you want to be a lot more careful with that, because that carb cleaner will strip the sticker off and you'll lose your serial number. It's also stamped on there, so not too worried if it's disappeared or gone. As long as it's stamped, it does have its serial number. And looking at the down tube again, hey, I think we're having a good start. So after this process of inspecting the frame and fork, that's good. Wash the wheels and true them up, see if those guys are good. And clean the drivetrain, see if we have ourselves a non-scary bike. But so far, the scary things of the scratches and so forth don't look very, very aggressive. So I think this is going to be a diamond. But truthfully told, I won't know that until I'm actually completely done. So after doing the wheels and this and the componentry and stringing it all up and giving it a little test ride, we'll have to determine if it's actually a diamond. But at this stage of the game, I believe it's a diamond. Check it out after this. Oh man, well, can't win all of them, right? Just saying. This Trek 2200 SL aluminum frame, the frame actually turned out really well, cleaned up. A lot of the scratches did buff out, which is awesome. The componentry actually cleaned up really well, and you know, it should work fine. Everything's shifting good, as in the shifters and the brakes, and actually those are going to be fine. The front wheel is actually good, but came across a hung dinger. The drive side spoke on this side here, which I'll show here, has a nice little crack in it. The wheel's toast. Well, me being a professional mechanic and I like matchy stuff, I'm gonna have to go out and look for either a new wheel set or a good used refurbished wheel set to put on this guy. So in my opinion, is this a diamond in the rough? Nope, unfortunately it is not. Like on those other, you know, TV shows of flipping houses and so forth, well, this one's a dud. We're gonna have to plow through it. But in the meantime, before I can get a wheel on this guy, or wheel set, onto the next bike. Well, anywho, that's some insights on this particular bike here. Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a cost of a lift, and the headset's also not cheap too. So when you add up the parts, wheel set between 100 and 200 bucks, headset another 50 or so. And other things on it, you know, with the cables and the housing, Yeah, you're looking at like 300 to 400 maybe in parts and labor, up to 5. That's a stinger if you bought this bike yourself, used. But anywho, that's what I do. I refurbish these bikes and make sure they are ready for the next person to ride on them. Until next time, have a wonderful day.